My name is Diane Mercer. I am 62 years old, and for 40 years I worked as a school librarian. I raised my son alone after my husband left. I paid every bill. I put my dreams on hold so he could chase his. The only thing I ever bought just for myself was a small cedar cabin in the mountains of Colorado, a place where I could finally breathe without being needed by anyone. That afternoon, after weeks of exhaustion, I drove up the winding road toward my cabin, my sanctuary. I imagined making tea, lighting the fireplace, sitting in silence for the first time in months. But when I turned into the driveway, I slammed on the brakes. My son Evan's car was parked in front of my cabin. Next to it were two unfamiliar SUVs. I felt an instant coldness in my chest. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Evan was on my sofa with his wife, Haley. Her parents sat in my armchairs drinking wine from my glasses, laughing as if they owned the place. My blanket was on Haley's lap. My candles were lit. My framed photo of Evan and me, the one I kept on the mantel, had been removed and tossed face down on the coffee table. Haley looked at me from head to toe and smirked with disgust. "Get out, you are trespassing. This is our house now, old intruder." Old intruder. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that my own son did not stand up for me. He looked away. I did not scream. I did not cry. Quiet has always been my sharpest blade. I walked to the sofa, sat across from them, and placed my cabin key on the table between us. "If you truly believe this is your house," I said slowly, keeping my voice steady, "call the police." Silence. No one moved. I folded my hands on my lap and waited. For the first time, they did not know what to do with a woman who did not beg. And in that silence, I watched their world begin to collapse, piece by piece, consequence by consequence, because they had no idea what I knew, and no idea what was about to happen next. I left the house before sunrise. The sky was still gray and soft, the kind of gray that feels like a clean sheet pulled over a tired body. I placed my overnight bag on the passenger seat, slid into the driver's side, and started the engine. The cabin key rested in the cup holder. It was attached to a worn leather keychain, the same one I bought at a thrift store years ago. That small key felt heavier than anything I owned. It represented something foreign to me: privacy, autonomy, a life that belonged to me. The road out of Denver was quiet. I crossed the city limits, watching streetlights fade behind me. With every mile, civilization fell away: chain stores, fast food signs, traffic lights. The air grew thinner and sharper, as if the world were urging me to inhale, to make room for myself again. I loosened my shoulders and turned down the radio. Silence was better. Silence had become the only place I could hear my own thoughts. Rain had passed through the mountains, overnight. The pavement still shimmered with water, reflecting the sky in broken patches. When I made the turn toward the San Juan Range, the landscape changed. Tall pines rose like emerald pillars on both sides of the winding road. Low clouds clung to their tips, and mist drifted lazily over the branches. The scent of wet pine pressed against the windows. It was the scent of freedom. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My palms were damp, not from fear, but anticipation. I repeated a sentence inside my mind, steady, like a prayer. I am going to rest. I am going to breathe. I am going to be unseen. Sometimes I forget that resting is not selfishness. It is survival. For 40 years, I did not rest. I spent my 20s and 30s shelving books as a school librarian. I knew the Dewey Decimal System better than I knew myself. While other teachers decorated their classrooms with colorful posters and motivational quotes, I saved every extra dollar for Evan's school field trips and sports fees. When my parents met me, they always said the same thing: "You are doing so well for a single mother." I smiled and nodded. I did not tell them that I skipped dinner twice a week to keep the lights on. The road narrowed as I began to climb an elevation. A sharp curve forced me to slow down. A trail of fog rose from the trees below, catching the early morning light like a silver ribbon. I rolled down the window and rested my elbow on the frame. Cool air swept into the car, brushing my face. I breathed deliberately. letting myself savor the moment. This was why I bought the cabin. Out here, no one could demand anything of me. I was no one's wallet, no one's maid, no one's emotional punching bag. I thought of my husband, the man I married at 20, the man who walked out when Evan was 8. He left a note on the kitchen counter. It said he could not handle responsibility. That sentence branded itself inside me. For years, I carried it like a private flaw. If he could not handle responsibility, what did that imply about me? That I was the reason life was heavy. I became an expert in pretending things did not hurt. I apologized when I did nothing wrong. I said yes when I wanted to say no. I swallowed my needs because someone else always needed more. Evan needed braces. Evan needed a car for college. Evan needed rent money after graduation. Evan always needed it, and I always gave. But this past year, something shifted. Evan stopped calling unless he wanted money. When I texted to ask how he was doing, his replies came hours later. Sometimes not at all. Haley, his new wife, ignored me completely. I was an accessory to their life, useful only when necessary. The cabin key glinted in the cup holder. I brushed my thumb along its teeth. I bought the cabin 3 months ago. I didn't tell Evan or Haley. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted something untouched by expectation. Every person in my life had taken something from me. This key, this cabin, was proof that I could choose myself, that I could build something that existed without sacrifice. Choosing myself felt disloyal. That is what motherhood can do. It makes you believe that your worth is measured only by what you give. A truck passed me in the opposite lane, splashing water onto my windshield. I turned on my wipers. The sound of rubber sweeping against glass was rhythmic, grounding. The road climbed higher, steeper. A sign appeared. Elevation 9,000 feet. My breath caught in my chest. Not from the altitude, but from a realization. I was closer to peace than I had been in decades. I glanced at the dashboard clock. If I kept this pace, I would arrive in less than an hour. I imagined the moment I would park in front of the cabin. I imagined stepping onto the wooden porch and hearing the boards creak beneath my weight. I imagined pushing open the door and inhaling that familiar scent of cedar and rain. I imagined pouring tea into my favorite stone mug. Then I imagined something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time. I imagined being welcomed by silence. That longing carried me through every curve of the mountain. As the road narrowed into a private gravel path, I slowed down and turned into the familiar drive. My tires crunched over small stones. Trees arched overhead like guardians. My heart beat faster in my chest. I reached for the key again. The leather strap was warm from sitting in the sunlight. This time, the key did not feel heavy. It felt earned. The gravel road to my cabin turned sharply before the clearing. I knew every shape of the trees here, every bend. My tires rolled slowly, almost reverently, as if the mountain itself was preparing to welcome me home. I could already picture the front porch, the chipped paint on the railing, the way the sunlight fell through the pines and made lace patterns on the wood. But when I rounded the final curve, my body went still. A metallic flash hit my eyes first, then another. 3 cars were parked in front of my cabin. One I recognized instantly, Evan's silver SUV. The other 2 made my heart knock against my ribs. They were strangers. A black crossover with temporary tags and a beige sedan stuffed with luggage up to the windows. The sedan had a dent near the taillight. There was a faded sticker that said, "I'd rather be camping." The absurdity of it made something tighten behind my ribs. For a moment, I thought maybe I was on the wrong property. But I knew this land. I knew every root and rock of it. My name was on the deed. My blood, sweat, and years were in the mortgage payments. Seeing those cars felt like seeing someone else's body wearing my skin. I pulled my SUV to a slow stop behind the line of unfamiliar vehicles. My fingers wrapped around the steering wheel so tightly that my hand trembled. The pine-scented air that moments ago had felt liberating now felt sharp, cold, violent in its indifference. This is not real. It cannot be real. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt wrong, too heavy. I sat there for several long seconds, the key still in the ignition, the cabin key hanging from its leather strap around my finger. The weight of the key was different now. It no longer symbolized freedom. Now it felt like evidence of a crime. My crime. Daring to believe I deserved peace. The cabin sat quietly ahead. The front porch lights were on. Curtains were drawn. A faint glow leaked out from the windows. Someone was inside. Someone who was not me. I opened my door slowly and stepped out. My boots crushed wet gravel. A soft drizzle had started again. Fine mist gathered on my sweater. The cold made me shiver, but the chill invading my chest had nothing to do with the weather. My voice inside whispered, maybe Evan came up here because he needed space. Maybe he forgot to tell me. Maybe everything is fine. But that hope was thin, transparent, fragile enough to break if any truth touched it. I walked toward the cabin. My heart beat slow and heavy, like it was dragging a chain. Halfway to the porch, I stopped. There was sound coming from inside. Laughter. Not gentle laughter. Not laughter that came from shared memories or quiet joy. This was loud, entitled, carefree. I froze. My cabin had never heard laughter like that. For years, all the sounds here were mine alone. The soft humming I made when I washed dishes, the kettle whistle, the creaking floor beneath my slippers. Even my loneliness had sounded different here. It echoed gently, but it did not mock me. The laughter inside now was not laughter of belonging. It was laughter of possession. I swallowed hard. I stepped closer. Through the window, I could see silhouettes. Someone gestured broadly with a wine glass. Someone else walked around with a blanket draped over their shoulders as if this were a vacation rental. The porch steps groaned under my weight. The wood felt softer than usual. Softer because I was not standing here as the owner. I was standing here as an intruder, a sick irony. I stood outside my own front door, staring at the old brass handle I had polished myself. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I expected to feel anger, sharp and hot, but what came instead was something colder, heavier. I felt erased. Through the door I heard voices clearly now, a woman's voice, sharp and commanding, a man's voice responding, agreeable and eager to impress. Glassware clinked. Music played. Something upbeat. Something careless. Why is my home playing music for people who do not love it? Why are my walls absorbing laughter that is not mine? A soft movement caught my eye. The welcome mat was gone. In its place was a new rug, bright and patterned. Something trendy, not practical. I bent down slightly, touched the edge of it. The fibers were still clean. Someone had replaced what was mine because they preferred something else. My chest tightened. My jaw locked. I inhaled slowly through my nose. Show, do not tell. Fine. I lifted the cabin key and studied it. The leather keychain was worn because I had held on to it through difficult days. It was supposed to symbolize that I finally owned something no one could take from me. Except ownership means nothing when respect is gone. My reflection showed faintly in the window. When I leaned closer, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Family photos were missing from the wall, the ones I had hung with trembling hands the day I moved in, the ones showing me young, holding Evan as a baby. Gone. The nails were still there, empty, bare like pulled teeth. I closed my eyes. They didn't just enter my home, they erased me from it. A soft murmur of conversation rose from inside. That couch is insanely comfortable. I told you we should use this place more often. Pour me another glass. Diane won't mind. She never minds. My name. Said with confidence that I would never object. My hand tightened around the key. Why do the people I love assume my silence equals consent? I pressed my forehead briefly against the door frame. The wet wood cooled my skin. Outside this door, I was invisible. Inside, I was replaced. I straightened my back. My voice formed a quiet sentence, not spoken aloud, but shaped with full clarity. This ends today. I turned the handle and stepped into the house that was mine. When the door swung open, warm air rushed toward me. Wine, perfume, the faint smell of cooked food. Home should smell like safety. Instead, it smelled like intrusion. My cabin was unrecognizable. The photographs that once lined the entry wall were gone. Spaces where memories used to live were now empty rectangles of lighter wood. The small nail holes looked like wounds. My framed picture of Evan at 10 years old used to sit right above the coat rack, gone. Another photo had been of me holding him at his kindergarten graduation, gone as well. In its place hung a print of a lake with a motivational quote, "Live, laugh, relax." Relax. My throat tightened. A decorative ceramic bowl I had never seen before sat on the console table. Inside it were keys, loose change, and someone's sunglasses. My woven rug, the one I had picked up at a local artisan market because its colors reminded me of the sunrise over the ridge, was rolled into a corner like trash. Voices drifted from the living room. Laughter, comfortable, settled. I stepped forward. My body stopped again at the threshold, not because I was afraid, but because the sight punched the air out of my lungs. Haley, my daughter-in-law, was curled up on my favorite chair, the one I saved up for months to buy. Deep green upholstery, soft but structured. The place where I would read novels by the fire. Her feet, shoes still on, rested on my matching ottoman. She held a glass of red wine like a queen surveying her territory. Evan sat near the window, shoulders hunched, scrolling on his phone. His face was pale, as if he had been caught doing something wrong but didn't know how to undo it. Across from him, two people lounged comfortably. Haley's parents. Her father, Martin, was chunky with an expensive watch. Her mother, Laura, wore a silk blouse and held a plate piled high with food. No one noticed me at first. Haley saw me before anyone else did. Her smile froze. She placed her wine glass down hard enough that it clinked. Well, look who finally decided to show up. All conversations stopped. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. I swallowed the ache in my throat. Calm, breathe, stand straight. "What are you doing here?" Haley asked slowly, like I was a disturbance, not the owner. She crossed her arms over her chest. "You're early." Early, as if she had planned my presence on a schedule. "I didn't know anyone was here," I answered. My voice came out steady, surprising even me. "This is my cabin." Haley blinked, then gave a laugh so sharp it felt like a slap. "Your cabin? Cute." She gestured around the room lazily. "Since when?" "Evan invited us. He said we could use it for a little family getaway." Family. That word hit harder than anything else. I was family, yet I had not been invited. I turned to my son. "Evan, did you tell them they could stay here?" He didn't look at me. He stared at the floor as if the grain of the wood might offer him an escape. "I thought it would be fine." His voice was low. "You're never here." The words sliced through me. Never here, as if that meant I didn't exist. I took a slow breath. "And the photos? Where are they?" Silence. Martin shifted in his chair. "We moved them. We wanted a cleaner look. The cabin felt cluttered." Cluttered? My life, my memories were clutter. Laura added quickly, "We put them in storage upstairs. We were just trying to help make this space more inviting." My voice tightened. "Inviting for who?" No one answered. Haley leaned back, smirking. "Don't be dramatic, we're guests." "You are uninvited," I said. Haley laughed again. "You don't own the place. Evan said this cabin is basically his inheritance, so what's the difference if we come early?" Inheritance. My stomach knotted. This was no longer ignorance. This was entitlement. Evan finally spoke. "Mom, relax. It's not a big deal. You're always so intense about everything. Haley just wanted a break and her parents needed somewhere to stay for a few weeks until their new condo was ready." A few weeks. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You plan to live here," I repeated. Haley tilted her head like she was talking to a confused elderly stranger. "Honestly, Diane, you should be grateful. We're bringing life into this dusty little cabin." That was the moment something shifted inside me. A click. Quiet, but irreversible. I walked past them. The oak coffee table I refinished with my own hands now held charcuterie boards and wine stains. Someone had placed coasters on top of the wood. Coasters I had never bought. The fireplace blazed, logs popping. Above it sat a framed quote, "Home is where family gathers." Family. My family was gathered. I just wasn't part of it. Haley crossed her legs slowly. "If you're done staring, maybe you could give us some privacy." The more she spoke, the clearer it became. She believed she held the power, but silence is stronger than volume. I sat down opposite her. I placed my cabin key onto the table. The metal clink echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. "If you think this is your home," I said evenly, "call the police." Haley blinked. Martin sat up straighter. Laura's smile vanished. Evan finally looked at me, eyes wide. Haley's voice sharpened. "Excuse me?" I repeated slowly, "call the police." I folded my hands. My voice stayed calm. "I would like them to be here when I explain who owns this property." For the first time, Haley's composure faltered. "You wouldn't," she whispered. I met her gaze. "You have no idea what I would do." Inside, my heart cracked. But beneath that pain, something powerful rose. A knowing, a boundary, a woman reclaiming what she built. This space was mine, and I would no longer apologize for existing in it. I stayed seated, my hands resting lightly on my knees, even as the shock in the room thickened the air. No one expected stillness. People expect explosions when they cross a boundary. They fear yelling because yelling is visible, but they never know what to do with quiet. Silence unsettles the guilty. I let that silence stretch until Haley shifted in my chair, clearly uncomfortable. Her foot tapped against the ottoman, a tiny rhythm of irritation. I finally spoke. "Who gave you permission to enter my house?" I didn't raise my voice. The question was sharp enough on its own. Evan swallowed. Haley spoke before he could. "Evan told us you said we could stay." I looked at my son, not hard, not accusing, just looking for the truth that should have lived in his face. He looked everywhere but at me. "Evan," I said softly, "did you tell them I gave permission?" He stared at his hands. His foot tapped the wooden floor, the same way he used to tap his shoe when he was a boy caught lying about homework, except now he was a grown man lying about a home. "I thought it wouldn't be a big deal," he muttered. "We needed a place. We thought you wouldn't mind." "We." He kept saying "we," as though his decisions had been forced on him by marriage rather than shaped by his own spine. "You didn't answer my question," I said quietly. "Did I give permission?" Haley leaned forward, confident again. "Maybe you forgot you did. At your age, memory gets tricky." There it was, gaslighting. Turn the doubt back on the person you wronged until they question their own sanity. It was a tactic Hayden, my ex-husband, used when he wanted to cheat without guilt. The past whispered sharply in my ear, "You're overreacting, Diane. You're too sensitive. You must be remembering wrong." Haley had no idea she was borrowing language from a long line of men who underestimated me. "My memory is fine," I said slowly. Martin, the father-in-law, held his wine glass with both hands, as if gripping a shield. We assumed she agreed. Evan said, I interrupted gently, "who gave you permission?" Haley rolled her eyes and exhaled dramatically. "Evan said you told him to use the cabin whenever we need. Do you not remember saying that?" "No," I had said, "you're welcome to visit if you ask first, but people who feel entitled hear only what benefits them." "Did I say you could use it whenever you want?" I asked, voice steady. "Or did I say to ask me first?" Haley shrugged. "Same thing." "It is not the same thing," I replied. She crossed her arms. "You should be grateful we're enjoying this place. It was sitting empty. It deserves people. It deserves life." A flash of pain burned through my chest. Empty. Deserves people. I was those words. I was the emptiness she resented. I was the absence she thought could be replaced. I kept my voice calm. This house was not empty. I came here today. "Well," she smirked, "now it's full." I turned to Evan again. "Did you tell them this was their space?" His throat bobbed. I said, "It could be ours one day." Haley sees the opening. "He's your only child. Logically, he will inherit it. It's just early access." My jaw tightened. "You don't inherit something while the owner is standing in front of you." Haley shrugged. "That's a matter of interpretation." I inhaled slowly and deeply. The anger inside me wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was precise. It was the knowledge of boundaries crossed, respect shattered, dignity ignored. I glanced around the room again. The missing photos, the new decorations, the smell of someone else's cooking. My life had been cleared out to make room for theirs. "Evan," I said again, softer than before, "look at me." He finally lifted his eyes. They were full of guilt, but not courage. "Did you tell them I gave permission?" I repeated. His lip trembled. "I didn't think you'd show up." Not an answer. Haley leaned back, smug again. "This is ridiculous. Diane, you're being dramatic." I didn't respond. I stood and crossed to the wall where my photographs had been. I placed my palm against the lighter wood. "You removed my family photos." "They didn't match the decor," Haley said. No hesitation, no shame. Laura nodded, as if supporting a decorating decision at a furniture store. "We thought we could freshen up the place. It felt outdated." Outdated. That word landed differently. It didn't describe the cabin, it described me. I turned to face Haley fully. "You replaced me." She laughed lightly. "Oh, please, you are overreacting. You should be flattered we chose your cabin instead of a hotel." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't choose the cabin. You chose the convenience of someone who never says no." Haley blinked. "Good." I took a step closer, not aggressive, just present. I spent my life being needed, not valued. I thought those were the same thing. Evan whispered, "Mom." Haley cut him off with an annoyed hiss. "She forgets things. She probably told you and just doesn't remember. Derek warned us this might happen." I froze. Derek, my ex-husband, her source. Evan's eyes widened. He hadn't wanted that fact to surface. My stomach twisted. So that was the narrative. Diane is forgetful, fragile, fading. It is easier to erase a woman when you convince everyone she doesn't remember being whole. "My memory has never been the problem," I said quietly. "The problem is people assuming my silence means permission." The silence in the room shifted, heavy, dense. I stood straighter. "One last time. Who gave you permission to enter my house?" Evan finally broke. "I said you wouldn't care." "There is a difference," I replied gently, "between not caring and not being considered." Haley scoffed. "We're already here. The house is full. Just go back to town and come another weekend. Evan and I have been drowning. We needed a break. You should want us to rest." "I do want you to rest," I answered. "I don't want you to erase me to do it." Then I said the sentence that shifted everything. "You will pack your things and leave." Haley stood abruptly. "Excuse me. This is our weekend." "No," I said calmly. "This is my house." Power did not need volume. It needed clarity. Haley's face twisted with anger. "If you don't leave, I will call the police." I returned to the chair, sat down slowly, and folded my hands. "Call them." Haley's face flushed red, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I am calling the police. You are trespassing." She said it loud and triumphant, like someone sure the world was on her side. I didn't move. Instead, I reached for the cabin key that lay on the table. The brass felt warm against my skin. In that moment, it felt like a symbol of every hour I had worked, every bill I had paid alone, every year I had put myself last. Slowly, deliberately, I set the key down. The metal made a soft click against the wood, a small sound, but it thundered through the room. "Trespassing," I said, my voice steady, "is when someone is in a place they have no legal right to be." Haley blinked. "What is that supposed to mean?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I didn't defend myself. "Trespassing," I repeated gently, "is what you are doing." Her jaw tightened. "I am calling the police." "Good," I said, "call them." Time did something strange then. it slowed, like the universe decided to stretch a thin layer of silence over everything so no distraction could dilute the moment. Haley grabbed her phone with a jerk, clearly expecting me to panic. Her thumb hovered over the screen, waiting for me to scream or beg. Instead, I sat. Not on a random chair. I sat in my chair, my green reading chair by the fireplace, the one she had been lounging in like a queen. I lowered myself slowly, with the kind of control that only comes from exhaustion and clarity. I crossed my legs and folded my hands in my lap, the way I used to sit during parent-teacher conferences. No rush, no fear. In that simple movement, something shifted in the air. Laura, the mother-in-law, straightened on the couch. Martin frozen. Even Evan's phone slipped in his hand. This wasn't the reaction they expected from the woman they assumed would stay quiet forever. They expected tears. They expected outrage. They expected me to fight for a place they already believed was theirs. I chose the weapon they never saw coming. Silence. Haley stared at me like she didn't understand the rules of this new game. "You heard me," she snapped. "You need to leave. This isn't your place anymore." I rested my elbow on the armrest. "It is," I said, "and I am not leaving." "You are crazy," she muttered, sliding her finger across her phone screen. From the corner of my eye, I saw Evan shift. He looked torn between fear and embarrassment, but he didn't say a single word to defend me. It hurt. Pain that deep doesn't scream. It sinks. I took a slow breath and spoke softly. "Haley, if you truly believe I am the intruder here," I said, "please make that call." My calmness rattled her. She wanted a dramatic fight. She thrived on chaos. I denied her that satisfaction. Instead, I sat as if I were the homeowner dealing with strangers, not the mother confronting betrayal. Haley swallowed and pressed the call button. "I am calling." "Wonderful." My voice came out steady, clear, no trembling, no desperation, just truth wearing calm clothing. The dial tone filled the living room. Evan finally found his voice. "Haley," he whispered, "maybe we should just talk about this." She waved her hand in his face. "Stop acting scared. She should have warned us before showing up." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Warn us. Warn us before entering my own home. Martin cleared his throat. "This is unnecessary. Maybe we should just pack up." Haley silenced him with a glare. I leaned back in my chair, my posture relaxed. I let my gaze move around the room. I took in every unfamiliar object. The cheap decorations, the clutter of their belongings spread everywhere with careless confidence. The empty spots on the wall where my photos used to hang. They didn't just occupy my space. They erased me from it. Haley began speaking into the phone. "Yes, I want to report a trespasser. She broke into our cabin. She refuses to leave. Yes, we feel unsafe." Her tone shifted from arrogance to practiced vulnerability, victimhood as a strategy. Laura reached for her hand sympathetically. Evan looked at me again. "Mom," he murmured. I held his gaze. There were no tears, no pain on the surface, only the quiet question inside my eyes. How did you let it get this far? Haley ended the call with satisfaction. "They're sending officers. You should start packing your things." I smiled. Not a cruel smile, a knowing smile. "I will wait here." Martin exhaled loudly. "Diane, let's be reasonable. We misunderstood. We thought—" "No," I interrupted, voice gentle. "You assumed." He opened his mouth again but found nothing to say. The silence deepened. I noticed Haley's hand was shaking slightly. Fear, not from danger, but from losing control, had cracked through her performance. "Why are you so calm?" she demanded. I uncrossed my legs slowly. "Because facts don't need volume." Her eyebrows pulled together. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means the police will ask who owns the house," I said, "and I will show them proof." Haley rolled her eyes. "Evan said you bought it for us." Evan stiffened. He looked like he wanted to disappear. I leaned forward slightly. Buying something for someone and someone being entitled to what I bought are not the same. She scoffed. "You're just jealous because this place feels alive with us here." "No," I corrected. You're just shocked because I finally said no." Haley opened her mouth again, but Martin placed a hand on her arm. "Let's wait outside," he whispered. But Haley refused to budge. Evan finally stood, but his voice was barely audible. "Mom, maybe we can resolve this without the police." I looked at him. "My entire life," I said slowly, "I resolved everything without help. I gave. I forgave. I made excuses. I stayed quiet." His mouth parted, guilt flickering. "Today," I continued, "I am done solving a problem I didn't create." Haley scoffed again. "We just needed a place. You're being selfish." Selfish. The same word my ex-husband used when I asked him to stop disappearing on weekends. The same word Evan used when I hesitated to pay another bill. I let the word settle inside me. It feels different now. "If protecting my space and my dignity makes me selfish," I said, "then I am finally learning." Laura dropped her gaze to the floor. As we sat in silence, the crackling fire suddenly seemed louder. Logs popped, sparks rose, and somewhere outside, a car drove past on the mountain road. Haley shifted again, suddenly unable to sit still. "You don't scare me," she whispered. I smiled softly. "That's good. Fear is not what I'm here to teach." She frowned. "Then what are you trying to prove?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. That love has limits. The room frozen. "And that silence," I added, "is not consent." Outside, the sound of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of the police. I sat back in my chair, completely still. This time, it was Haley who couldn't breathe. The knock on the door came 12 minutes later. Firm, measured, official. Haley practically leapt to her feet. "Finally!" Her voice was thick with triumph, the sound of someone certain they had won. She smoothed her hair, widened her eyes to look distressed, then rushed toward the door. When she opened it, the evening air rushed in along with 2 officers, one older, tall with a square jaw, and a younger woman beside him taking notes. Haley stepped into her performance immediately. "Thank God you're here," she breathed dramatically. "There is a woman in our house, an older woman. She barged in and refused to leave. We're terrified." She emphasized older women as if it were a threat. The male officer nodded. "Where is she now?" Haley pointed at me like she was identifying a criminal. "There, on the chair. She won't move." The younger officer looked at me, pen poised. "Ma'am, can you tell us your name?" I stood up slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't defend myself. "My name is Diane Mercer." Haley crossed her arms. "She's unstable. She doesn't even know where she is." I ignored her completely. The male officer continued. "Ma'am, they are claiming this is their residence. Do you have identification and proof of ownership?" Haley was practically vibrating with anticipation, ready to watch me crumble. This was the moment she thought she owned. Instead, I reached for my purse, the one I had set down on the small wooden bench when I walked in. Inside was the item I never traveled without. The folder. Not just any folder. A red leather folder worn with years of handling. Inside it lived the things I earned with my life. I set the folder gently on the coffee table and opened it like a ritual. Property deed, mortgage payoff letters, tax statements, utility bills, all of them bearing one name, Diane Mercer. The older officer scanned the first document. His expression shifted immediately. "This is the deed," he confirmed, turning it so his partner could see. "Owner, Diane Mercer." Haley's voice cracked. "Wait, no, that can't be right. Evan said—" The officer held up a hand to silence her. "Ma'am, these documents show legal ownership." Evan put his hands on his head. His face went pale. Laura looked like a statue. Even Martin shifted back, suddenly very interested in the floor. Haley was the only one who kept fighting, her voice rising in pitch. "She must have tricked you. Evan told us she gave us permission to use the house." The younger officer looked at Evan. "Sir, did you tell them she authorized your stay?" Evan swallowed, eyes darting between his wife and the police. I didn't think she'd care." Haley spun around, furious. "So you lied?" Evan didn't answer. The older officer turned to me with newfound respect. "Ma'am, do you want these individuals removed from your property?" Removed. Not asked. Removed. For the first time all afternoon, my lungs filled fully. Calmness rushed through my chest like warm water. "Yes," I said quietly. "I want them to leave." Haley stared at me as though I had betrayed her, as though I owed her something. "You're going to throw out your own family," she hissed. I met her eyes evenly. "You walked in here believing you were entitled to what is mine. You removed my photos. You replaced my belongings. You erased me from my own house. You decided I no longer existed." The officer nodded slowly, almost as though he needed her to hear this. "Ma'am," he told Haley, "being someone's relative does not give you the legal right to occupy their property without permission." Haley's mouth fell open. Laura rushed toward the officers, wringing her hands. "We didn't know. We thought we assumed." "It doesn't matter what you assumed," the officer said firmly. "You need to vacate, now." Martin tried a different tactic. His voice softened. "Diane, we didn't mean any harm. Evan told us." I held up a hand, stopping him. "You all made choices. Now own them." Haley's eyes were wild, like a cornered animal. "We have nowhere else to go. We were supposed to stay here until our condo is ready." "That is not my responsibility," I answered. The younger officer spoke again, voice professional but firm. "You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings. We will remain here until you are gone." Haley looked at the officers, then at Evan, then back at me. "You're going to regret this, you bitter old woman." Instead of reacting, I returned to my chair and sat down, hands folded. Calm, steady, perfectly in control. The older officer glanced at me with something bordering on admiration. "Do you want to file a formal trespassing charge?" His question hovered in the air. I thought about every year I worked 2 jobs to raise Evan, every sacrifice, every time I made myself small so others could feel big. "No," I said softly. "Their actions are punishment enough." Haley scoffed. "Oh, please, you think you won." I met her gaze without blinking. "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about finally choosing myself." The officers started directing them to collect their bags. Haley grabbed items aggressively, shoving them into luggage. Martin and Laura moved quietly, too ashamed to meet my eyes. Evan lingered behind them. He looked at me with something raw. Guilt, maybe even shame. "Mom," he whispered, "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I didn't look away. "Things only go as far as we allow them," I said. His lip trembled. "Are you really making us leave?" "No," I replied gently. "Your choices are making you leave." Haley stormed toward the door, dragging her suitcase, voice trembling not with anger, but humiliation. "You're unbelievable. You'll die alone in this stupid cabin." I let her words hang in the air. They did not hurt. They revealed her fear. When the door finally shut behind them, the silence returned. But this time it sounded different. It wasn't empty. It was mine. The older officer tipped his hat slightly. "You handled that with dignity, Ms. Mercer." The younger officer added quietly, "Most people yell. You didn't need to." Because real power doesn't shout. Real power sits down. After the door shut and the police car rolled down the gravel path, silence returned to the cabin. Not the painful, heavy silence of being ignored. A different silence. One with space to breathe. I remained seated in my chair for a moment, staring into the flames of the fireplace. The fire cracked gently, like it was applauding without sound. Then I reached into my bag again. The red leather folder still sat on the table from when I proved ownership, but underneath it rested another folder, thinner, black. A folder no one knew existed. I slid it out. The black folder held 5 years of my life. 5 years of deposits, withdrawals, transfers, proof. Evan must have felt my movement because he returned from the doorway. He didn't speak, he just hovered, unsure if he was allowed to be in the same room with me. "Evan," I said quietly. "Sit." He obeyed. He looked smaller than he had an hour ago. I opened the black folder. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, receipts, copies of checks, all neatly labeled. Evan's name and Haley's name appeared on nearly every page. Evan swallowed. "What is that?" I didn't answer immediately. I wanted the silence to do the talking first. "This," I finally said, "is every dollar I have paid on your behalf." He flinched. I pulled out the first tabbed section. A credit card logo was printed at the top. "Year 1, I said. "This is the balance I paid off on Haley's credit card, $7,800. Evan blinked rapidly. "Mom, you told us it was a gift." "I did," I replied. I just didn't realize that gift was the beginning of a pattern. I pulled the next document from the folder. A check copy, $4,000. "This was for your wedding deposit when Haley insisted on a larger venue." Evan rubbed his forehead. "You offered to help." "Yes," I said. "Offered to help, not to finance your entire life." He opened his mouth, but I continued. Another section. Another sheet. "This is the down payment on your condo, $25,000. He stared, stunned. "You kept records of all this." "You never remember what I give," I said softly. "So, I had to." His eyes filled with realization, slow, painful. I turned to the next page, showing monthly bank transfers, every month, same date, same amount. "And this," I said, "is the mortgage payment I have been making for the past 19 months. He jerked back as if hit. "What mortgage?" "Yours." His voice cracked. "Wait, the automatic payment wasn't from my account." "No." He blinked, unable to process. "You didn't know because you never checked," I said. "Every month, I transferred the money so your credit would stay clean." He stared at me, face drained of color. "You've been paying our mortgage." "Yes." He whispered. "Why?" "Because I wanted you to feel safe. I wanted you to build a life without the fear I had when your father left us with nothing. I wanted to protect you." Evan's face crumbled. "But I never asked you to." I held his gaze. Not angry, just honest. "You didn't have to ask. You expected." He swallowed hard and whispered, I thought we were managing." "You were not managing," I replied. "I was." We sat in silence. The cabin felt like the truth had finally opened the windows. He leaned back, rubbing his chest like he was suddenly short of breath. "Haley will lose it when she finds out." "No," I said gently. "Haley will adapt. Entitled people always adapt." I took a slow breath and looked into my son's eyes. "Do you know how many times I chose between paying your bills and paying for the repairs on this cabin?" He shook his head. "All of them," I answered. The words hit him, not angrily, simply the truth. "I bought this cabin with the money I saved after your mortgage finally stopped draining me." Evan's face crumpled. "Mom, I didn't know it was that bad." "You never asked." He opened his mouth. I closed it. I tried again. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question landed like a stone, because I spent my entire life protecting him from the truth that might hurt. And in doing so, I raised a man who thought comfort was owed to him. I answered quietly, "Because I believed love meant shielding you." He lowered his head into his hands. "I messed up." "Yes," I said. "You did." I didn't soften the blow. He needed to hear it. But then I continued, voice quieter. "And I messed up too." He lifted his head slowly. "I taught you that I would fix everything, that I would sacrifice without limits, that you didn't have to worry about consequences." Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mom." The apology was real. The regret was real. But reality remained. "You're 32 years old, Evan," I said gently. "If I disappeared tomorrow, what would you do?" He didn't have an answer, because he had never had to. I reached out, placed the stack of documents into his hands. "From now on," I said, "your life belongs to you." He looked down at the folder as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. "You're cutting me off." "No," I corrected. "I'm setting you free." He stared at me through tears. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I didn't raise you to earn love, I replied softly. I raised you to learn from it. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. For a moment, all I heard was breathing. Hi, mine, the cabin's, like the house itself exhaled after years of holding secrets. I stood and moved toward the porch door. I'm going to make tea, I said. When you're ready, you may sit with me, not as someone who takes, but as someone who learns. I stepped outside into the cool mountain air and let the door close gently behind me. Inside, I heard Evan cry, not because he lost the house, but because, for the first time, he finally saw what I carried. After Evan cried in the living room, I stepped outside onto the porch. The evening air was crisp and smelled like wet pine. The mountains were fading into blue silhouettes. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady inside my own skin. I sat in the old wooden rocking chair, the one I bought at a thrift shop, and refinished myself. My hands wrapped around a mug of hot tea. I could still hear Evan moving inside the cabin, shuffling papers in the black folder. If he was finally facing the truth of how much I had carried, then he needed that space. My phone sat on the small porch table, black screen, silent. I looked at it for a long moment, not with anger, with clarity. I took a slow breath and unlocked the phone. My home screen was simple, one folder labeled Bills. For years, it held the password to every lifeline Evan and Haley depended on. I tapped the banking app. My finger hovered over the automatic payments section, the one responsible for sending the mortgage payment each month. Line after line showed identical transfers. Same date, same amount, repeated, predictable, quiet, like I was the invisible engine running their entire lifestyle. My throat tightened, not with pain, but realization. I pressed the toggle switch. Canceled. A small message popped up. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? I whispered to no one. Yes. Not out of spite, out of release. The screen blinked, confirming the cancellation. The monthly mortgage payment, gone. Next tab, insurance. Haley had insisted that they couldn't afford adding a second car to their plan, so I had covered the insurance of Evan's SUV for the past year and a half. My name, my policy, my bill. I tapped to remove the vehicle from coverage. Another confirmation message appeared. Removing this vehicle may leave the driver uninsured. Again, my voice answered quietly, that is not my responsibility anymore. The notification confirmed the removal. Then came the final item, transfers labeled simply, support. Tiny amounts added up to something massive, not financially, but emotionally. It was the amount that turned me into a lifelong safety net. I opened the transfer settings and pressed cancel recurring transfer. Reason for cancellation? I selected financial independence. My breath trembled slightly, not from fear, but from relief. I sat back in the rocking chair and closed my eyes. For 32 years, motherhood had meant plugging every leak in the ship, holding everything together, working overtime, patching holes Evan didn't even know existed. But helping is not the same as enabling. For the first time, I felt the truth settle deep inside me. Raising a child is temporary. Raising an adult is a choice. And I was done choosing to carry a grown man. The cabin door opened gently. Evan stepped onto the porch. His face was blotchy from crying. His eyes landed on my phone. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. I turned my head toward him, ending something that should have ended a long time ago. He swallowed hard. "You cut the automatic payments." "Yes." He rubbed his palms together anxiously. "Mom, we needed those payments." "I know." "What are we supposed to do now?" "You adjust. You learn. You grow." He sank onto the porch railing, head bowed. "I didn't realize how much I depended on you until today." "I know," I repeated. "I made that dependence easy." He lifted his head, eyes sharp with confusion. "Why didn't you just tell me to stop asking?" "Because mothers don't want to be the reason their children struggle." He looked into my eyes with something close to understanding. "Is that why you never asked for anything back?" "No," I answered softly. It's because I never believed I was allowed to have needs. His face shifted. Something heavy settled on him. We sat in silence. The kind of silence that uncovers truth, not hides it. A breeze moved through the trees. A pine cone dropped onto the porch with a small thunk. Evan whispered, "What changed?" I looked at the cabin key, still sitting where I left it earlier. "You erased me from my own house." He winced. "And I realized," I continued, "that I spent years funding people who would erase me the moment I stopped paying." He opened his mouth to protest, but I gently raised a hand. "This is not punishment, Evan. This is a correction. I feel like I'm losing you." "No," I said. "You are not losing me. You are meeting me." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "For the first time, you are meeting the version of me who puts herself first." We sat quietly while that truth landed. Finally, Evan stood. His voice was small. "I don't know how to live without your support." "You will learn," I said, "because you must." He nodded slowly. I picked up the phone again, not to undo anything, but to take one final action. I opened Haley's contact and typed a short message. "From now on, please communicate with your bank instead of me. I wish you both the best. Diane." No anger, no apology, just a boundary. I hit send. I turned to Evan. "I will always love you. That will never change." He swallowed. "But the support, love is support," I said. "Financing your adulthood is not." He closed his eyes, nodded once, then walked inside. I leaned back in the rocking chair, inhaled the mountain air deeply, and let my shoulders soften. For the first time in years, I felt light, because I finally understood. Help becomes harmful when it prevents someone from growing, and enabling is not love. Consequences do not always arrive loudly. Sometimes they appear as small inconveniences that quietly multiply. For Haley and her family, consequences arrive the way winter settles over the mountains, gradually, icy, unforgiving. After I canceled everything, the mortgage transfer, the insurance, the monthly support, life began shifting without my involvement. I did not interfere. I did not check on them. I simply observed the way a storm watches a river that once believed it could not flood. The first domino fell 2 weeks later. Evan called me, not to apologize, to ask why his car insurance had been messed up. He'd been pulled over on the freeway, and the officer informed him politely but firmly that his vehicle was no longer insured. The coverage had been removed, which meant the car had to be impounded. Evan had no credit card limit left to pay the fee. He began taking the bus. He was late to work repeatedly. 3 weeks in, his employer let him go. Not with cruelty, just the reality that life is indifferent to unpreparedness. When he told me the news, his voice broke. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this." I wanted to tell him. I wanted to rescue him. A mother's instinct is not rational. It's muscle memory and heartache intertwined. But enabling it does not help. So I said gently, "You fix it by learning." He cried softly. "Haley is furious." "I know," I said. "Not at me." He paused. "At me." Because without the steady current of my silent support, she saw the real financial truth. Evan had not been providing. I had. The second domino fell for Haley. Her curated luxury life began to crumble. No automatic payments, no hidden rescuer, no invisible bank behind their decisions. She posted designer handbags for sale online. Each listing had the same caption, "Barely used, purchased last season." It was strange seeing her chase strangers online, begging them to negotiate, arguing over $50, after years of demanding thousands from me, without blinking. There was a particular irony in watching a woman who replaced my family photos with minimalist decor now stage her luxury purses against a wrinkled bedsheet to get the right lighting. The third domino hit her parents. Their condo closing fell through because the bank reevaluated their financial qualifications. Apparently, having a daughter-in-law's mother paying your debts from behind the curtain helps more than anyone realizes until the curtain falls. Their temporary rental expired. They were asked to vacate. Haley's mother called me, her voice trembling. We really misjudged the situation. I answered calmly, yes. She waited for me to fill the silence. I didn't. I owed them nothing, not even words. Inside me, a quiet voice remained steady. Support is not the same as servitude. Then came the most surreal moment. Haley called me, not yelling this time, crying, "Diane, please, we're drowning. Evan lost his job. My parents have nowhere to go. We're trying, but nothing is working." I listened. Her voice shook like someone finally meeting the world without a safety net. "Just until we get back on our feet," she pleaded. "Can you help us again, please?" There was a time I would have said yes instantly. There was a time I believed my value came from saving people. But now I knew. The more I rescued them, the more they forgot how to swim. I took a slow breath. I let the silence carry weight. Haley waited for pity. Instead, she got the truth. "Haley," I said quietly, "I spent years financing a life that was never mine, years covering for choices I didn't make." She sniffed. "We were stressed. We weren't thinking." "You were thinking," I corrected. "You were thinking someone else would clean up the consequences." There was a long pause, then the quietest, rawest question. "Don't you care what happens to us?" And I answered honestly, "Yes, I care." I heard her inhale with relief. "But caring," I said, "does not mean carrying." Her breath caught. I continued, "You call it drowning, but I call it learning. You are adults. You will figure this out." Her tone shifted, desperate. "What about Evan? What about your son?" The hardest moral conflict I've ever faced sat between us. Love does not disappear when boundaries arrive. Love hurts differently when you finally choose yourself. "I love Evan," I said softly, "but loving him does not mean sacrificing myself to rescue him from the results of his decisions." Haley whispered, "So you're abandoning him?" "No, I replied. "I am trusting him." She went silent. People who have always been rescued mistake boundaries for abandonment. I remained calm. Take responsibility, make a plan, work, budget, adjust. "But what if we fail?" she choked out. "Then you learn," I said. "Failure is a teacher. Dependence is a cage." Haley cried. Harder. "We don't know how to do this." "I know," I said, not unkindly. "That's why it must happen." I could feel the power shift. Not power over them, power over myself. Haley finally whispered, "We'll figure it out." "Yes," I said. "You will." We ended the call. I didn't hang up angry. I hung up whole. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled and glowed. Evan's empty coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter. The black folder of financial receipts still lay open on the table. I walked over and closed it gently. I had spent years believing that giving endlessly was love. Now I understood. Real love holds the door open but does not drag someone through it. I stepped onto the porch and breathed in the cold mountain air. Haley's family was in free fall. But free fall is not punishment. It is the gravity required for growth. The mountain air always feels sharper after a storm. Cleaner, braver. A few days after the confrontation, I drove back up the winding road toward the cabin. No cars in the driveway this time. No voices leaking through the windows. No foreign laughter. Just quiet. My quiet. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Cheap perfume, leftover food, the heavy scent of a candle I never bought. The cabin wasn't trashed, but it wasn't cared for either. Cups left on surfaces, crumbs scattered across the counter, a jacket draped over the back of a chair. I stood in the entryway and took a slow breath. Healing sometimes begins with noticing what hurts. I set my bag down and rolled my sleeves up. Cleaning wasn't a chore today. It was a reclamation. I started in the kitchen. Haley had left a cutting board on the counter with dried cheese hardened on it. The sink was filled with glasses, wine stains dried on the bottom. I washed each dish slowly. feeling the warm water run over my hands. The sponge scraped, the faucet hummed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was performing domestic labor for someone else's comfort. I was tending to my space, my life. When the last dish clicked into the drying rack, I wiped the counter. Slow strokes, left to right. The wood beneath my hand felt familiar again. Next, I moved to the living room. Pillows were thrown carelessly across the sofa. A half-burnt candle sat on the table, lavender-scented, slick with melted wax. I extinguished it and dropped it into the trash. Then I picked up the decorative bowl Haley had placed in the entryway, the bowl that held their keys, sunglasses, coins, proof of occupation. I set the bowl on a side table while I decided whether it should be thrown away or hidden somewhere in the back of a closet. I moved on. The air shifted when I reached the wall where my photographs once hung. The nail holes were still there, little scars marking absence. I ran my fingertips across the empty spaces. The wood felt colder here, as if the house remembered being abandoned. I whispered, "Into the room, not again." I walked into the guest bedroom, the closet where I stored the frames. They were stacked carelessly, as though my memories were seasonal decorations to be taken down when the aesthetic changed. I sat cross-legged on the carpeted floor and lifted the first frame. A photo of me at 27, sitting in a cheap apartment with baby Evan asleep on my chest. My hair was messy and my eyes were exhausted, but I looked happy. A happiness built from survival and devotion. I touched the glass. "You were worth everything," I whispered to the woman I used to be. Another frame, Evan in a superhero costume at age 5, beaming at the camera. Haley hadn't even bothered to wrap this one. It was just shoved behind luggage. The ache rose in my throat but didn't drown me. I gathered all the frames in my arms, cradling them against my chest the way I used to carry Evan when he was small. Back in the living room, I stood before the empty wall. The nail holes stared back at me. I hung each photo one by one, letting the hammering become a heartbeat, soft, steady. The cabin began to look like my home again, but there was one frame left at the bottom of the pile. The frame with subtle gold edges, the oldest one. It held a picture of me and Evan on his college graduation day. I was wearing the same cardigan I still keep in my closet. He was smiling, his arm around my shoulder. He had written on the back in messy handwriting, "For the person who never gave up on me." My throat tightened. When someone erases you, they also erase who they used to be with you. But this photograph is remembered. I hung it in the center of the wall, not for aesthetics, for truth. When I stepped back, the wall no longer looked empty. It looked like mine. My eyes drifted to the green chair by the fireplace. Haley had taken ownership of that chair so easily. She sat there as if comfort belonged only to her. I walked to the chair and sat down slowly, letting the cushion accept my weight. I wrapped the old knitted throw blanket around my shoulders, the one I made the winter after my divorce, stitch by stitch, loop by loop. I remembered how lonely I felt during that time, how small, how replaceable. Now, wrapped in that blanket, I didn't feel small. I felt rooted. I sipped tea and watched the flames rise in the fireplace. The cabin no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a sanctuary again, a place where I could exist without shrinking. An hour later, I went to the entry table. The decorative bowl Haley had brought, the one that held evidence of her entitlement, sat waiting for judgment. I picked it up and held it for a moment. It didn't belong here. Not because it wasn't pretty, but because it represented intrusion. I walked outside, set it gently in the donation box in the back of my car, and closed the lid. Back inside, standing in the center of the living room, I whispered a truth that vibrated through the beams of the house. I was removed from this home once. It will never happen again. The words didn't echo. They settled. They rooted. That night, I slept in the cabin without fear of footsteps or entitlement. I woke with the sunrise washing across my quilt and birds tapping lightly at the cabin window. I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. The mountains stretched quietly, older than every mistake I ever made. stronger than every boundary I ever feared setting. The world didn't end when I stopped rescuing people. It began. I sat in my rocking chair and held the photograph of Evan again, the one from his graduation. I traced the writing on the back with my thumb, for the person who never gave up on me. Maybe he would remember that version of us again, or maybe we would build a new version. Either way, I finally understood. Being needed is not the same as being valued, and love that requires erasing myself is not love. The mountain breeze moved gently across the porch. The rocking chair creaked under me. The cabin walls no longer felt heavy with intrusion. I was not erased. I was restored. 2 weeks passed without a single request for money. No emergency, no just until payday, no guilt-soaked obligation disguised as love. Just silence. I spent those days repairing small things around the cabin, tightening loose hinges, polishing the wood stove, walking the trails. Healing doesn't always look like breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like breathing without waiting for the next crisis. On the 15th day, Evan called. Not FaceTime, not a plea, just a simple call. "Mom, can I come up to the cabin? I want to talk." He sounded different. I didn't hear about entitlement. I heard humility. I paused before answering. "Yes, you may come, but I'm not offering a rescue." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for one." 3 hours later, his old sedan rumbled up the gravel road. Not the SUV I had paid insurance for. That had been sold to cover bills. Evan stepped out wearing the same coat he'd worn in college. It was a little frayed at the pockets. That small imperfection made him look human again. He walked slowly toward me on the porch. No swagger, no expectation. He stood with his hands in his pockets, looking younger than 32, older than the boy who once believed I could fix anything. "Can we talk inside?" he asked. "No," I replied gently. "Let's talk here." Boundaries don't have to be walls. Sometimes they're just doors kept open, carefully. He nodded and sat beside me on the porch step. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The mountains held the space between us. "Mom," he began, voice steady but fragile. "I got a financial counselor." I turned my head slowly. "You did?" "Yes, a real one. Someone who doesn't let me avoid reality." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "She made me write down everything, every subscription, every bill, every meal out. We calculated how much of my life was paid for by someone else." Someone else. "He didn't say anything to you. He knew." "And what did you learn?" I asked. He took a shaky breath. "That I haven't been living. I've been floating, waiting for someone to carry me." His voice broke. "Waiting for you to carry me." I looked ahead at the mountains instead of him. "And now, he whispered, "I don't want that life. I want to earn the ground I stand on." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a thick notebook, pages filled with writing and calculations. I made a budget, a real one. No shortcuts, no imaginary income. He tapped the first page. I applied for a job at the hardware store near our apartment. I also applied at 3 warehouses. Warehouse. Hard work, heavy work, not glamorous, not cushioned. It takes humility to start again. I felt something in my chest shift. Not softness, not forgiveness, but respect, forming slowly, the way moss returns to rock after winter. He turned another page in the notebook. "I talked to Haley," he continued quietly. "Really talked. I told her I don't want to live on borrowed money anymore. I told her we have to downsize." "That must have gone well," I said dryly. He huffed a humorless laugh. "She yelled. She threw things. She accused me of choosing you over her." "And what did you say?" "I said I'm choosing adulthood." I looked at him then. He wasn't blinking away guilt this time. He was holding his truth steady. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. He swallowed hard, eyes shining. "That means more than you know." We sat again in silence. A breeze pushed through the pine trees. A hawk circled slowly overhead. Evan rested his forearms on his knees. "Mom, I want your advice." "Advice," I repeated. "Not money." "Not money." He handed me his notebook. I flipped through pages of handwritten budgets, weekly spending limits, goals, repayment plans. He had highlighted things in different colors. He'd even drawn small check boxes next to each action. Evan had never planned anything past Friday, yet here he was, planning months, planning growth. "I don't know if this is enough," he said, "but I'm trying. I'm really trying." I closed the notebook and handed it back. "You don't have to be perfect," I said. "You just have to be responsible." He nodded slowly. Then he said something he had never said before. "Mom, if you have advice, I want to hear it." I inhaled deeply. Advice I could give. Enabling, I would not. "Responsibility," I said, choosing every word carefully, "is not something someone hands to you. It is something you pick up." "I know," he said. "And no matter how much I love you," I continued, "I cannot carry your life for you. I don't want you to," he replied. I turned toward him fully. "Then show me. Not with apologies, not with promises, but with actions." He nodded. "I will." We sat there for a long time. He didn't fill the silence with excuses. He didn't ask for reassurance. He didn't beg to be saved. Finally, he stood, slipped his notebook into his backpack, and looked at me with a newfound steadiness in his voice. "Thank you for not rescuing me." My throat tightened. "You're welcome," I whispered. He walked toward his car, gravel crunching under his shoes. Before opening the door, he turned back and said, "Mom, I am going to earn your respect." I watched him drive away. No part of me wanted to follow. No part of me wanted to rush in and soften the road ahead for him. Growth belongs to the person walking. Inside the cabin, my green chair waited near the fire. My photographs hung in their rightful places. I sat down, wrapped myself in the knitted blanket, and whispered into the warm air, "Responsibility is not a burden. It is proof of becoming." And I let the quiet hold me. December arrived quietly. Snow settled over the mountains like a soft blanket. The cabin looked like something pulled from a winter postcard. I decorated simply. Pine branches on the mantel, a string of warm lights around the window, a single candle flickering beside my chair. It was Christmas Eve. I sat by the fire, knitting a scarf. Not to fill silence, but to enjoy it. The cabin was peaceful. The only sounds were the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the crackle of burning wood. I was not lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being at peace. My phone, resting on the table beside my mug of cinnamon tea, buzzed. I glanced at it. Evan. We hadn't spoken in several days. He had sent occasional updates, notes about budgeting, about interviews, about his progress. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for rescue. He reported effort. The phone buzzed again. I answered on the third ring. "Hi, Mom." His voice was calm, lighter than I had heard it in months. I smiled without meaning to. "Hello, Evan." There was a pause. Not awkward, just full. Like neither of us wanted to rush something meaningful. The sound of wind filtered through the line. He must have been outside somewhere. "I'm not calling for money," he said quickly. I laughed softly. "I didn't assume you were. I just want to say something." I set down my knitting and leaned back in the chair. "I'm listening." He exhaled shakily. "I got the job." Warmth spread through my chest. "Evan, that's wonderful." "It's not glamorous," he said. "Warehouse work, heavy lifting, but it's steady, and it's mine." Pride swelled in his voice. Mine, not funded, not carried, earned. "I'm proud of you," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," he finally whispered, "thank you for making me do this. I blinked. "Do what?" "Grow up." Something in my chest cracked open, not with pain, but release. "That was your work," I said gently, "not mine." "But you stopped enabling me," he said. "I hated you for it. And then I realized how heavy your love must have been." He choked on a breath. "I used you. I took advantage of you. I let Haley talk about you like you were a burden." I closed my eyes. His honesty hurt, but honesty always arrives with healing. "I allowed it," I said softly. "That's on me, too." "No, Mom. You loved me." And you mistook that love for obligation. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He continued, I went to counseling. Counseling. The word fell into the room like a gift I wasn't expecting. I had to understand why I felt entitled to everything, why I believed the world should bend when I refused to stand. I didn't interrupt. I kept thinking support meant never falling, but support means letting someone learn how to stand. I smiled. That's wisdom. He breathed out a shaky laugh. I also sold the gaming system and 2 designer bags. I laughed louder. Haley must have loved that. She left, he said quietly. The laughter faded. She packed her things last month, said she didn't sign up for struggle. A sadness passed through me, not because she left him, but because she was never staying for the right reasons. I'm sorry, I said. No, Evan replied. I'm not. Her leaving was the best thing that happened to me. Without her noise, I finally heard my own voice. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. I'm learning to cook, he added. It's terrible, burned eggs twice. I smiled. Twice. Maybe 4 times, he admitted. We both laughed. Then he said it, the sentence I had waited years to hear. I don't need anything from you. My breath stopped. I just want to thank you. Tears pricked my eyes, not because he finally appreciated me, but because he finally appreciated himself. He inhaled again. I want to come visit the cabin. Evan? Not to stay, he clarified, just to bring something to you, a gift. You don't have to buy me anything. It's not bought, he said. It's something I made, with my hands. Pride radiated through his voice, not arrogance. Pride born from effort. My throat tightened. All right, come tomorrow. He hesitated before adding, Mom, I know I said this already, but thank you. You didn't abandon me. You gave me my life. I whispered, Merry Christmas, Evan. Merry Christmas, Mom. He hung up. I sat still, letting the warmth of the moment replace every old wound. Tears slid down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from peace. I stared at the old photo on the wall of me holding baby Evan, his tiny hand gripping my sweater. I used to think motherhood meant never letting go. Now I understood. Motherhood is learning when to open your hand. The fire glowed brighter. Snow continued falling outside the window, and for the first time in years, I smiled without weight in my chest. Not because my son needed me, but because he didn't. I sat in front of the fireplace with a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. The flame danced slowly, steady, and patiently, kind of like healing. It never arrives all at once. It comes ember by ember, choosing silence over spectacle. Outside, snow fell in gentle sheets across the mountains. The cabin glowed with warm, golden light, not the harsh light of demand or expectation or emotional debt, just warmth, quiet, safety, peace. For the first time in decades, peace belonged to me. The scarf I'd been knitting lay finished on the arm of the chair, blue and soft. I wrapped it around my shoulders and allowed myself to take a real breath, a breath without weight. I used to believe that strength meant holding everything together. Now I know strength is choosing what to no longer carry. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to win. Haley and her parents had already moved out of Evan's life. The mortgage was no longer my anchor. The constant financial emergencies were gone. Evan stood on his own feet now. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but firmly. Nothing about this ending was loud or cinematic. It was quieter than forgiveness, quieter than closure. It was freedom. The cabin felt like my true self. The version of me that existed before I was anyone's wife, anyone's mother, anyone's safety net. Just Diane. I walked to the wall where I had rehung the old photographs. My parents, my grandparents, me holding a much younger Evan in a hospital blanket. I touched my fingertips to the frame. Thank you, I whispered to the woman I used to be. Thank you for surviving, for staying kind, for enduring loneliness with dignity, for not letting bitterness steal your softness. The kettle clicked behind me. I poured another cup of tea. In the city, my days used to revolve around other people's needs. Now, here, every moment belongs to me. I spent mornings reading books, afternoons walking forest trails, evenings journaling beside the fire. The cabin was not just a structure, it was a boundary, a line in the dirt saying, "Here is where I stop shrinking." Every creak of the wooden floor reminded me I was alive, and not just existing in service of others. The wind outside howled briefly, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not sorrow, not anger, acceptance. I curled into my chair, legs tucked under me, tea steaming in my hands. The room smelled of cedar and pine and the tea's soft sweetness. I closed my eyes and listened to the fire breathe. Sometimes healing sounds like nothing. I picked up my journal and opened it to the page where I had written my mantra weeks ago. I am no longer raising adults. Below it, in smaller handwriting, I choose myself without the need to apologize. For a moment, I imagined the version of me from a year ago, tired, depleted, constantly rescuing others from consequences they created. She would have apologized for needing rest, for taking up space, for wanting something for herself. Not anymore. I looked down at the object on the table, the small brass cabin key, my emotional anchor, the symbol of my freedom. There had been a moment, the day I put that key on the table in front of Haley, when everything shifted. Not because I fought, but because I refused to. Power is calm. Power is quiet. Power is not proving. Power simply is. The snow fell heavier now, thick layers gathering across the balcony. I stood up and stepped outside. Cold air hit my face, fresh and clean. I breathed it in. Down below the mountain road, I saw headlights in the distance. For a heartbeat, I wondered if Evan had changed his mind, if he had come tonight unannounced. But the vehicle passed without slowing, and instead of disappointment, I felt only gratitude. Love doesn't always return the way we give it, but loving another has never been the mistake. Forgetting myself was. I stepped back inside and placed a log onto the fire. Sparks rose with a soft pop. Tiny fireworks of orange. I whispered to the flames, to the mountains, to myself. Coming back to myself is the victory. Not revenge, not punishment, not proving anything to anyone. Just choosing myself. I sat down again and opened my journal to a blank page. I wrote, "The world will not end if I stop saving people. The world will begin if I start saving myself." The cabin was silent, but my heart was not. Around midnight, a soft chime sounded. My phone lit up from the table with a simple notification. I smiled. Freedom sometimes arrives disguised as paperwork. I placed the phone face down. It no longer dictated my emotions. I no longer lived waiting for the next crisis. The snow continued falling, blanketing everything in sight. No footsteps, no noise. No chaos lived here anymore. Just me. Just peace. A part of me wondered if forgiveness would ever fully take shape. If Evan would someday join me here, drinking tea by the fire, telling me about his life. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I would be okay. Forgiveness did not require reconnection, and healing did not require permission. The fire crackled again, embers falling into place. I leaned back and let the moment hold me. If someone were watching me from the outside, they might say nothing was happening, but everything was. I wasn't winning against someone. I was winning myself back. Before going to bed, I looked once more at the photographs. I rested my hand over the frame of Evan as a child. "I love you," I whispered, "but I love me too." I turned off the lamp. The cabin went dark except for the fire. Outside, snow softened the world. Inside, I softened toward myself. And that was enough.